Thank you all for coming. I'm Carolyn Finch. I'm the program manager here at the Digital Corridor. I believe I've met most of you and happy to see a lot of familiar faces. If anyone who's new to the corridor and wanted to hear more about it and hear about the programs that we run, I'm happy to meet with you. I believe you all have my email at this point, so just shoot me an email, schedule a time, and we can definitely chat, and I might buy you another coffee. So we do have coffee and donuts outside with Krispy Kremes. It's a different than what we usually have, but we thought we'd change it up for once. I'm here to introduce the two Brians, who are probably our most, how should I describe you?
Dynamic?
Yes.
Just if you're looking for a word, that's fine.
Creative in our flagship building. They've been here, Brian number 1 or 2, whichever you want to, 2.0, number 1, has been here since June,
Yeah.
and then second Brian since July, August-ish.
Ish.
Since then, they've both been working together, collaborating, which I think I had a hand in matching that. No, I didn't. But both are very, very talented, have been taking on a lot of work in the Charleston area, and we're very, very proud of both of them. Brian Compton is the creative director for Lewis Pulse, and Brian Zimmerman is at Curate 43, which is a local company right here in Charleston. So today is how your brand should sound and look. I'm not here to talk about that. Obviously, the two Brians are. I'll let Brian 1 take it away. Or 2.
Oh, yeah. Let me grab a clicker. I'm guessing right is forward, right? We'll
Yes.
find out. Cool, so I'll give you guys, I'm Brian Compton. Good to meet you guys. And I'm going to give you a quick little Lewis spiel, and then we'll fly into the good stuff. So, Rich Young actually could probably do this. Do you want to do this? You good?
Oh, I've been out of the game for a year.
Rich was at Lewis for 6-10 years, something like that?
Like 8.
Yeah, 8 years? Like 8.
8-ish.
So we're a public relations company based out of London, and we have 5 U.S. offices, San Francisco, Boston, D.C., and San Diego. And I got on board with the San Francisco office, and then when my wife got a job in Charleston, we ended up via New York, which was a circuitous route, but we ended up here, and being creative director, I pitched the idea that, hey, we start up a production outpost here. We have 25 offices all over the world, 26 offices as the slide says, and essentially our idea is to field projects coming in from all those offices. So right now we mainly do U.S. work, but we have some work coming from the other regions, and design, development, video. That's really what we're kind of honing in on here. Graphic design, development, any web development that goes along with that, or social development. And then video, a lot of business-to-business technology, enterprise software. I think Rich landed 4 or 5 of these accounts. So these are the kind of businesses, I always say, like publicly traded companies nobody's ever heard of. So that's kind of the spiel that I've said.
Make money.
Yeah, that make money and really secure. And it's a PR firm, sometimes really boring companies are great because you're not doing much crisis management, you're not dealing with crazy news all the time. So so that's kind of a look at what we do. We win awards and we do social marketing and all that stuff. Let's keep moving. So Lewis Pulse is the digital marketing arm of that. So we were doing blocking and tackling PR for years and years and years, and that's still our core competency. But in 2006, I guess, we all started being like, ooh, social media. And then as these boring publicly traded companies found out in 2009, 3 years later, they're like, well, maybe we should try this stuff out. So that's when we started Lewis Pulse, was to really kind of address some of those needs that were coming through from our existing clients, and also try to go after new clients under that premise. This is me, creative director. This is my own personal brand. And of these things that we do, social media, SEO, SEM, design, we kind of put it in these buckets so that when we're talking to clients, we can, some clients we do all this stuff for, some clients we just do one of these things for. My remit is really the design and creative and the tech and dev. With the design and creative, really today we'll be talking about branding, but we kind of touch on all of these things. So enough of all of that. That's Lewis. Okay, 2 sides of branding. I'm just organizing mine around 3 branding mistakes, and I'm focusing on like the messaging and communication side, and Brian's going to focus on the fun stuff, which is the visual. So my slides are decidedly less cool than Brian's slides, so deal with it. But I'm going to organize just a quick little 1, 2, 3 around some things that people do wrong that we see a lot, and the first thing is doing it for the wrong reasons, and really why reassess your brand? It's all about these brand exercises. Like if you were a car, if your brand was a car, what would it be? If it was a dog, what would it be? You see these exercises all the time, and they're great to do, I think, on a regular basis just for good measure. But oftentimes companies they they do them because they're bored, or they do them just for the wrong reasons. So I want to talk about some reasons why are good to do them that oftentimes people don't think of. So a lot of times product and services change, right? So I had a good example this morning. Oh, Caroline, I was talking to her about Banana Republic. Do you guys remember when Banana Republic was all safari gear, right? You'd go in there and you'd buy the khakis and the shirts with the giraffes on them and everything. And then, slowly but surely they kind of rebranded to be business casual wear, and that's what they are. And it kind of almost happened where you didn't even notice it. It was a slow transition and things like that. But their products and services changed, so they needed to rebrand. Another reason is the market changes. I think we're standing in, Ernest, what was this, a Blockbuster, a Hollywood Video or something? Their product changed. I mean, their market changed, right? They were not, it wasn't there anymore, so it dried up, and they didn't necessarily rebrand in the right direction. So now we have the Charleston Digital Corridor here. But that's a great example of the market changing and the company not really keeping up. So the corporate changes. This happens a lot more probably at like the startup and just after level when acquisitions happen and things, you merge and you partner and things like that. The bigger corporate changes are, bigger brands are a lot more cumbersome, so it's probably a little bit tougher to really just change on the dime for corporate changes with the bigger brands, but it still happens. And these are three reasons. And people don't brand because of these things. Sometimes these will happen, and they're so busy working on the infrastructure of making these things happen that they don't even think about how it affects the brand and how we change the brand to represent it. So a lot of times these are great reasons that people pass up. The more common reasons that people brand are they feel like their brand is tired and old, and that's the most common, I would say, and probably the best reason too. But another reason is people get confused here because sometimes your brand isn't that tired or old, it's just dissipated because it's been poorly used for years and years and years. It's gotten abused, and your partner, it's just kind of been torn apart over years of misuse. So, these two are kind of fall in the same region, but oftentimes your brand's not as tired and old as you think it is. It's just been abused, and you need to kind of nurse it back to health. So, the big rebrand is such a big undertaking that I think a lot of times people kind of overthink why they're doing those exercises and workouts and figuring out what's happening with their brand. So that's a mistake number one. People are doing it for the wrong reasons. And then I put, or just because. My wife and I have every year we have a little rebranding exercise we do, and it's really silly, but we've moved twice in the last 3 years, and that's kind of how we've started it a couple years back. It was like, okay, what are we going to do now? We're moving, we're just, not necessarily reinvent yourself, but what do we want to be in this next place, or how do we want to move our careers forward, our family forward in these next places? And we went from being non-homeowners to homeowners in the last year, and that was part of our personal brand. We went from not having a kid 2 years ago, and we kind of just talk about these things. So also, just because it's not a bad reason to do the exercises and workouts, doesn't always mean you need to act on them and kind of, So I think as brand people and marketing people, within your companies, no shame in doing these things. Just know when to act. Don't feel like there's always a reason to rebrand. Any questions on that first one, or experiences, anecdotes, stories? Nothing. Coffee not kicked in. All right, good. Mistake elements for the brand. This is a huge mistake that people make. And this is, I always put the elements into 4 buckets. So the first one is the kind of content messaging driven bucket. And there's always, if you go online, there's just lists, you can find the elements of a brand, and everybody's got their different bullet points. I kind of try to put it in 4 because if you have 20 of them, then you can group them together a little bit better than that. So the way I group them together generally is, the story, mission, promise, which is your history and how you got to where you are and what you want to do for the world and all that stuff. Product, services, benefits, really straightforward. This is what we're making, why it works, why it's different. All the differentiation points kind of fall into that one. And then voice, culture, and style. This is the loosest one, I would say. The one that's probably the toughest to nail down and the least tangible. And we'll go into a little bit of that later. And then visual identity, which is what Brian will be speaking on just after me. And that's the stuff that this is probably the most common mistake where the people say, okay, this is our brand, and you say, well, tell me about your brand, and they give you brand guidelines, and it's, this is our font, this is our color, this is our logo, we're done. And if you see really good brand guidelines, you'll also see tone portions of it, and you'll see kind of all of the other factors playing in there too. But I think a lot of people just say, oh, I need to redo my brand, and they call a designer to get their logo done, and that's part of the game, not the whole game for sure. But it's really how all these elements together make people feel. And we'll do a quick little deconstruction here. We have very popular brand here, and we have 3 of the elements. We have the story and mission and the promise here. We have the product and service, and we have the visual identity. We don't really have the voice and culture in this piece, but when you add the voice and culture, you can actually get a really solid brand feel to the whole thing. So it's how all those things work together. Dissected, they don't do the job, but if you leave one out, they really don't do the job that well, although it can be done. But when you put them all together, you get a little bit of a vibe from whatever you're seeing here. And they do it over and over again. And the thing is this is something that Brian will go into visually, is just the flexibility of your brand. You know, it doesn't have to, every ad doesn't have to look the same, every piece of collateral doesn't have to look the same. And, you know, the different emotions come with different visuals. So this one's the whole, you know, nostalgia thing going. Here they have the earthy kind of, and the other thing about these guys too is their product has actually become their logo in a certain way. I mean, their logo has the Argentine flag because that's where they help out kids with no shoes, but their product has actually, in all these pieces, you know, there's another one here, you know, the product has really become, you know, from any angle you know when it's a Tom shoe. And that's something too from a branding perspective. They've latched on to that second bullet point, that product services, and really brought the visual and that together too. So that's something to think about. And let's see. So yeah, another same thing with these guys. You've got 4 different pieces, and you know when you put them together in a website, this is just the same thing, deconstructing the website. And this is something I do oftentimes when we have a piece to put together too. If you have all the pieces and you construct what you think is a great ad or a great website or a great whatever, make sure that you can deconstruct it and have all those pieces and you're touching on all those points. If you're missing some of them, perhaps it's okay, but at least identify the fact that you've hit on the things that, the things that need to be conveyed there. This is one more of these, I like this one a lot. So we've got the promise, where there's life, there's bud. We've got the visual identity, we've got the product, and then we've got some kind of, and this is the weirdest thing for Budweiser, like on the barrel too, sure, on every label, on bottles, cans, okay, it's just really weird copy and vibe, but when it's all put together, like it makes you feel a certain way, like, who's the most interesting man in the world? What beer is that? Like they totally stole this from this guy, right? Like this is, except I think he's a waiter. I think he's a bartender. He's not necessarily like the guy getting the beer. He's the guy getting the beer. But anyway, it gives you a vibe. It's a cool feeling, and it doesn't, you don't get it from this. So just kind of showing how all the elements come together, and with all those elements, the visible are just part of the deal, and what Brian will be talking about a lot is all of these elements, which is, again, people confuse them for branding, and as far as the visual identity, these are the core pieces of it. But there's a lot of other part in the visible too, like the office, dress code, and glassware, and whatever else you can think of that people don't think of when you think of branding. I remember at Lewis we had these mugs, in all the offices that have a logo on one side and then just a clever saying on the other side, like hot stuff, or I can't remember what they all used to say, like media junkie or whatever. But they were cool. So when people would come and we'd have guests and we'd pour them a coffee, they'd be, oh, these are neat, And if nothing else, they've had a little brand experience, And the same thing goes with the dress code and the office and all of that stuff. So the visual are just part of the deal. I do think that the messaging-based elements are important too, and that's the naming, the voice style. Those things we talked about, the story, history, mission, and promise, differentiator, all that copy, all of that, what you say and how you say it. But just like the visual, these things have the unassumed heroes too. Answering the phone, do I say, hello, Lewis PR, this is Brian? Or am I saying like, yo, you need a design? Like, you're going to get different responses. The types of copy, breaking those down is just, while you have a brand voice, it needs to be translated widely. It's so many people, again, with our boring publicly traded companies nobody's ever heard of type clients, they get this voice and then they want to translate that to social, and then they want to translate that to web, and they want to put that on their sell sheets, and they want to put that on an infographic. I'm like, an infographic doesn't have copy really, so we're not going to use all your proprietary terminology, your data awareness engine, data wrapping technology, that stuff, nobody cares really. So, I think a lot of it too is knowing when to take your, these things and apply them to these and how, So I think that's some of the mistakes that people make when they're thinking about these messaging parts of the various elements too. So yeah, just as think about those elements. These are the pieces, in my mind at least, the pieces that make up a brand, or at least some of them. But none of them on their own really make up the brand. So that's the second mistake I would say people make. And lastly, am I doing okay on time? I feel like I'm talking fast. How are we doing? You okay? Brian, you just have to talk longer if that's the case. Yeah. So the last thing is execute first, think second. And this happens in branding all the time. This happens in absolutely everything we do. And it's just the nature of the beast these days. The communications are rapid. Everybody wants everything yesterday. And it's just a matter of, I was talking to Brian the other day and I was like, how many people come to you and be like, okay, I got this thing, a product or a company, I need a logo. and their project brief is really consists of 3 or 4 bullet points, and they haven't thought about that. I mean, maybe they've thought about it, but they haven't written down the thought so that their partners and agencies and designers and whatnot can act on their behalf. So this is something that that happens not just in branding; it's all over the place. But and this is super fluffy and all that. But this is something that I think if you just do every once in a while, just run through this exercise, then it helps you calibrate yourself and calibrate your brand, and all the people that are involved with it and everyone that's representing you. You can spell this stuff out for people, and then if you just make a document out of this and then hand it out with the project briefs, then at least people have, it could be as easy as brand guidelines, but that's, as we all know, brand guidelines, as soon as you hit, save on that PDF, it's old, and then 6 months down the road, you're handing that thing out. And so it is worth refreshing. It is something, and maybe you can't refresh your brand guidelines all the time because it is a pretty robust document, but you can do something like this and readdress all these questions just in something a little more simple that's, copy-based. So the little find yourself exercise around this is know how you're different, and we'll we'll just do it this way. Do anybody want to be a volunteer? Come on, somebody do it. You can answer for your company or for yourself as a personal brand. Anyone? Am I going to have to pick somebody? I'm going to pick you, Rich, if I have to pick somebody.
Go for it.
Right on. So we're just going to just in one sentence. Give me one sentence. You can answer for yourself or for e-group.
Okay.
All right. Who are you?
The data center specialist.
Okay. In one sentence. That's fantastic. What do you do?
Make things run faster.
Make things run faster. Like Nike? Like Nike?
Like technology.
Okay. So make technology run faster. Why does it matter?
Because we got to get shit done quickly.
Yeah. Productivity. Okay. So yeah, we've got one sentence and almost one word on those. So you guys know what you're doing. You know how you're different. You know what you're doing. What this really exemplifies is the importance of storytelling. And that's one thing I think. Like if you're getting confused and saying visual identity is what branding is, then you're not really thinking about the storytelling aspect. You're thinking about the visual storytelling perhaps, but not necessarily how to be concise and how to be smart about things. And really, as far as those brand elements, this is where the story, history, mission, and promise come in. So if you're mapping this exercise back to those 4 core elements, these are the ones that you really address with this piece here. Know your tribe, and this is really important for branding too. So we'll do you, Brian, since you need to warm your voice up anyhow.
All right.
And just this is not necessarily one sentence and one word answers. These are a little longer answers. But from your customers, which type of customers represent your brand?
Customers that want a fresh look and be on the forefront of what's new and hip, I guess.
Yeah, local, regional. Both. Okay, cool. And then your team. Who represents your brand from a team perspective?
A group of creative, like-minded people that like to work hard but also have fun.
There you go. I would agree with that. That's pretty good. What are your customer touch points? This is something that oftentimes gets ignored too, and this is, your sales team is not your only customer touch point in customer service. That's usually what people are thinking, especially if you're retail. You have this very obvious customer touch point, but there are a lot of customer touch points. It could be the T-shirts you make. It could be the social interactions you have online. It could be a lot of different ways that people you don't even know you're having a touch point with, and that's a lot of the visual branding where that comes in too. So. When you're knowing your tribe, you also need to know who is representing your brand out there. And that brings us to the third one. Which partners and agencies are right? A lot of times you pick partners and agencies based on price. A lot of times you pick partners and agencies based on skill sets or capabilities. But you should also think about them kind of as the brand match. And, having gone to a lot of these meetings with Rich, we sit in there and a lot of times what we do is we listen for what their culture is. And then we try to build ourselves around, pick the best teammates from our side and pick the... and Lewis puts them forward and tries to make a team that fits for that client. But, oftentimes I don't know if the clients are always thinking about it from a branding perspective. So as far as knowing your tribe and knowing who's representing your brand and acting on your behalf and writing and designing on your behalf and doing all that stuff, it's important to know who they are, but it's also important to inform them of all of this stuff. It's more than just a brand guidelines document. And what this one shows is the importance of culture, and if you're mapping it back to those core elements, this is the kind of voice, style, team type of things that come about. So really, one more, sorry. The third one of these is know where you're going. How will you grow your customers and teams? So for Lewis, we are having, for our teams, we have an organic growth plan where we're trying to hire some of the best talent in our office region. Then we have an inorganic growth plan of trying to use a mergers and acquisitions strategy to go out and kind of build in new markets. For our customers, we have a new business staff and staff that's always kind of looking for the next enterprise technology company that needs help with what we do. What's your goal? That's the really common one, and I think most people can answer that. But then, what's really your 5 and 10 year plan? Everybody has their kind of whitewashed 5 and 10 year plan, but doses of reality help when talking about that, and also disillusion helps when talking about that, because it doesn't hurt to dream big, but I think probably being realistic and being idealistic and finding where it is in the middle helps you answer those last 2 bullet points there too. And again, these are kind of this fluffy exercises, but I swear if you do them, you'll start to realize some things you didn't about your company. And sometimes it's just a matter of an individual doing them at a desk. Sometimes it's getting in a room with your colleagues and talking through these things. And sometimes it's actually doing a full-blown, letting this be the kickoff for more of a full-blown kind of rebranding exercise if you have the need for it. But, like I said, my wife and I asked it kind of silly by asking ourselves these questions personally, but it's kind of fun too. Fun to do over dinner. And this one shows innovation, this product services industry part of the mapping. So, I wanted to kind of take these exercises, but also map them back to those core elements so you can see, they're not just asking for the sake of asking. They're asking so that you can define everything there. And then an interesting thing too, and this is one thing we've done, customer personas are always a big thing, and user personas if you're building websites, like who are the visitor types. You can also do the exact same thing, turn it around, do it for your customers, and then what you're dealing with is any competition. You have just this parallel structure that you can compare with, right? So you're saying, okay, here's how we answered all those questions, and here's how we answered all those questions for our customers, or better yet, give them the questions to answer. And then you can start to look for the similarities and match up, and that can reveal some interesting things too. And it's a great exercise to do with competition as well, to try to figure out how you're a little bit different, or how you want to be different. A lot of times you do that with competition, and your answers look exactly the same as your competition's answers. And if that's the case, figure out how to differentiate a little bit heavier. So a lot of times it's not good enough to just build a brand. You need to build one that's different and competitive. I think that's it. Oh yeah, so if you turn those all around, you turn them from mistakes into rules. So instead of doing it for the wrong reasons, you do it for the right reasons. Instead of mistaking the elements for the brand, know all the elements for the brand, and then of course think first and execute second, as opposed to the other way around. And I think that's it. I hope I didn't go over too long here. Yeah, sure.
Have you ever worked with, or do you have any extra advice for companies that are like dealers off of a corporate brand that want to differentiate a little bit, but
tie yourself still to that
yeah.
kind of so it's like a service or a vendor for a larger brand, is that right? Or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
In that situation, like we're a trade show exhibit company.
Yeah,
So,
I mean the tricky part about that is usually in that case you're the smaller of the fish, and the other has the stronger brand and the more recognizable brand and the thing that you want to put to the forefront. So I think a lot of it is talking to them and knowing what they'll allow from a branding perspective, so that you're not,
Yeah.
slapping their logo on your colors and calling it a co-brand, you know what I mean? And also, I mean, a lot of times, I don't know if this is the case for you, they have restrictions about logo placement and your sizes of your logo compared to theirs and things like that. Is it that strict?
We're
or
not,
not?
I mean, kind of, we're not really worried about that, but I mean, from a strategy perspective,
From a strategic
kind of like,
perspective.
do we just go with what they have because it's cool, or do we, step
think
out a little and add some, because we can, but,
I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, I think
Yeah.
it's a little bit of both. I think you got to start with what they have because it's known, because it's done, and you're not creating extra work for yourself. But then as you see needs, and again, these exercises can help. If you ask yourself those 3 questions, and you see holes in your existing strategy and branding and whatnot, that's where you kind of put your efforts toward, doing your own thing. So, for example, if the visual's solid from them, you can kind of go back and start thinking a little bit more about maybe how they're differentiating. Maybe their differentiators aren't standing out in your market. Maybe that's where you need to put your effort. So I would almost, look at what they have, start with what they have, maybe go through an exercise like this or something like that and see where there's holes. That would be my suggestion. Just off the top of the head there. I hope that helped. It sounded like I was rambling. Anybody else? Thoughts, questions? Boos? Bring out the real talent? No?
Build you up.
Cool. Well, so with that, I'll pass it, Brian. Thank you guys a lot.
Thanks, Brian.
I'm the other Brian. I'm the lead pixel pusher and president of Create43 and also a partner. We are a full-service design, branding, marketing agency. We handle everything from, mostly the visual side, logos, advertising, websites, packaging, printing, marketing collateral. I even do book covers for Amazon. And so today I'm going to talk to you more about the visual side of branding. In my opinion, branding is what people say about you when you're not in the room. And the visual side of that is kind of what people talk about what you wear when you're not in the room. Bad brands can kill a good idea. No matter how good your idea is, if it has a bad brand behind it or bad brand management, it's not going to succeed. So how do you cut through the clutter? There's so many brands out there. You got to stand out in one way or another. Basically, you have to appeal to the creative and logical side of the customer's mind. You have your brand, which is where you start. This is the perceived emotional corporate image as a whole. This is what people believe you are. But what actually is encompassing visual branding? It's the alphabet of design elements which directly communicates the company's values and personality. So I'm going to go over the basics today. It's a broad topic, but I'm just going to go over the basics that kind of build your visual brand. And it all starts with your logo. A logo really identifies a business in its simplest form via the use of a mark or an icon. I'm also talking about the logo mark here, not necessarily the logo as a whole. So typically what your logo is the pinnacle of how people perceive your business visually. Your brand is what's underneath that really supports that visual style. A lot of people perceive the logo and the color palette, the typography as their brand, but it's actually a much more bigger thing. So how do you create a successful logo? Obviously these are all successful brands, and they all have some similar characteristics, which I'll go over now. First of all, it has to be flexible. Flexible in a few different ways. It has to be flexible that it's applied over a wide variety of mediums, websites, shirts, digital media, business cards. It has to be flexible, but it also has to be flexible visually. This isn't really a new concept. MTV's been doing it for a while. It's just bigger, more corporate brands are starting to adopt this style, where you still convey what the brand's about, but in many different ways. Google does this with their doodles. No matter how they change it up, you can still recognize the brand and you still pick it out as Google. A great example of this is the branding campaign for the Bahamas. They developed this logo and logo mark. It's probably like 5 or 6 years ago, but it's still very current. Obviously the logo mark itself represents the island chain, and they created this kind of visual language that use those marks to convey different things. You can see there they took it and broke it down into the individual islands using those same shapes. It still has that branded feel, but it gives individuality, and it really is like limitless when it comes to where it goes. This is their more identity package, letterhead, business card, envelopes, but you can see how they use the different different elements to really convey that. And it's, like I said, it's endless. It doesn't have boundaries. It can go on billboards, it can go on flip-flops, it can go on pretty much anything, and people recognize it as their brand. Second of all, it has to be memorable. It has to be something that people will remember and be a simple mark. Most logos from large brands are memorable. They're easy to digest and easy to describe, and they also evoke a subconscious feeling or memory about a product they're selling. Obviously, that's not a memorable logo, but that's an example of somebody that might try to do it themselves and put some clip art and a font together, but it's not memorable. And third, it has to be simple. Basically, the simplicity is going to be the most effective way to allow you to create a flexible and memorable logo, which I already talked about. If you keep it simple, straightforward, clean and simple, easy to remember, people will respond to it. In 2012, USA Today rebranded their logo. Obviously, their old logo was slightly dated looking, and they went to the extreme with simplicity. At first, when I saw this, I didn't really like it, but now it's kind of caught on. Obviously, this is their new logo. It's simple as you can get. Does it look familiar? But they really took it to the extreme, and now you can see when it's all put together how they were able to adapt this logo across all their mediums, their different compartments, and in the end it gives a much cleaner, more modern look after their rebrand. Next up in the visual side is typography. Obviously, typography is your fonts or brand that represent your brand. And they have to communicate, certain feelings and emotion. Obviously, every one of these fonts, conveys a different feeling, whether it's tech or elegance or playfulness. They all have their own place. Coke relies on a font that was actually created in 1885, but it's evolved somewhat over the years. But it gives that real classic feeling, and they rely on it for everything. Their font is their logo, basically. But it was a custom font, so it's not something that you can go out and buy. They have similar fonts out there, but it was customized by the designer to the point where it gives it its own uniqueness. But they really use it to hold their whole brand together, and the whole Coca-Cola classic, it does give that classic look with a still modern feel to it. The font also has to have personality. Obviously, if you choose the wrong font, it can convey the totally wrong thing about the company. Some examples: Disney doesn't seem so magical when it's put in a simple serif font. Dodge doesn't seem very tough or manly when it's put in a more simple serif italic font. Nike doesn't have that sports feel. Toys R Us doesn't have that playfulness. Prada doesn't have that sophisticated sexiness. It's all about the font. And last is usability. Usability, fonts not only have to work across a range of mediums, but they also have to convey the brand message. Starbucks does this a lot. They use fonts in their advertising. This is their same font style as their corporate font, but they use it to convey different feelings and shapes. And it also talks about who their brand really is. And lastly is color. Color is actually the most important. It's the first thing that influences a person's attitude towards the brand. It's very important. It's going to convey a certain emotion. Obviously, you see these brands here are the major brands out there, and depending on what they're selling or what they're promoting, they're using different color palettes to get that out there to their customers. You can see the brands in the far corner over there use a variety of colors, which shows a diversity, which I'll get into in a second. But whether you're trying to convey optimism, friendliness, excitement, creativeness, trust, peacefulness, balance, there's a color for every single adjective. And also recognition. People recognize just little slivers of color, but they immediately recognize the brand by that exact shade of tone of color. And they also convey different feelings. Whether you want to be pink and nurturing, sensitive, or green, money, balance, everything is conveyed through color. Color can also make or break your brand. Obviously, McDonald's doesn't seem very appetizing when put on an orange background, but when you put it with that shade of red that they have on everything that they use, it really makes you immediately think of food. It can also drive your customer to make a decision. These are all say all the same thing. However, certain colors are going to drive people to show trust or want to purchase something. It can also be used to show diversity of services. Like I talked about with the color brand, the brand color guide. There's different diversity can be used with a wide color palette. I don't know if you guys have ever noticed this, but there's an arrow in the FedEx logo. It can also be used to appeal to a diverse client base. So by using a kind of wide gamut of colors, you can appeal to a bunch of different audiences. And all that makes up your visual identity, which is visual aspects that form the part of the overall brand. Finally is the application of all these. So you have all these elements, this visual language you developed, and now you have to apply it to get it out there to your customer and convey what you want. These are some target ads. They use just their mark and they use their color palettes, and they kind of, it appeals to that creative side of the brain, but it also appeals to the logical side, and it gives people, it energizes people. It kind of flirts with the customer. And it doesn't even have to have words. It also has to have a certain style. It has to be, applied in a certain style that is applicable to that brand. Whether it's, hoodies, umbrellas, business cards, it also all has to be applied in a certain way. And over a wide variety of mediums. I already touched on this as well, but it all has to be cohesive, so it all works together. And even down to signage, everything is part of your brand. And so that is overall visual branding. And that's my spiel. You guys have any questions for me, or?
What does black convey? I
I
was looking at your logo. I was like,
Well, I didn't want to set any color to it because I didn't want to drive any tone. No, I mean, we use with black. I mean, it conveys a seriousness, but also it's a very simplistic color.
is yours always black? Or do you
No,
have
we
colors?
change it up all the time. We don't really have a color palette. Like I said, I mean, we're pretty flexible. If you go to the Creative 43 Facebook page, you'll see how we apply it differently, on our cover photo pages and profile pictures and whatnot. So we kind of just have like a free reign in color wise.
What do you think is the worst corporate, like the Fortune 50 or something like that, logo or rebrand of recent?
Gap. I don't know if you're familiar with that. I wish I had an example. I actually was looking at that the other day. Probably Gap or Tropicana had a pretty bad rebrand too.
Did Gap revert back?
Hmm?
Did Gap revert back?
I don't know. Did they?
One of
Yeah, it was
these
like
people made a big
crowdsourced
mistake
or
and
something.
reverted like a month or two later.
I think it was Gap, yeah.
Yeah.
And like I said, the USA Today, I didn't really like that when it first came out, but the more I look at it, it's simple, but it gets the message across.
What do you think about the Microsoft logo?
I don't use Microsoft products, so I don't that appeal to me.
Yeah.
What's the importance of
I'm leaving
taglines?
now.
Sorry?
What's the importance of taglines? Because I've been trying to change ours for a while, and
A
there's
tagline.
kind of a historical precedent that the founder likes it, but it does nothing for us.
Right.
And I'm just trying to understand what, I like our logo, or I like our new visual identity, but the tagline's not doing it for me. So how do I arm
Right.
myself with saying we need to change this now?
Well, a lot of people go about the mistake of trying to make their logo convey everything, and that's not necessarily the case. A tagline is a good accompaniment to the logo and to the brand to say in words kind of what the brand is trying to convey. But it has to be short and sweet. It has to be 3 to 4 words max, and it has to accompany the logo in some way and interact with the logo in some way.
What is the tagline?
Technology solution for serious competitors.
So like Nike.
And it's that is the I just think it's too long, and that's the ethos of the company is very aggressive and
I mean,
ankle biting isn't the word, but we're going up against big kind of CDWs and big companies, but yet we're serious, we're aggressive, we get the job done, and we do it when we say we do. But
we make tech happen.
yeah, I just think it's serious competitors. I'm not comfortable with.
A lot of times what I do is I'll sit down with my team and just do some wordplay and just come up with a list of words that represent us or the brand we're trying to develop, and then you can combine those words in different ways, and actually it'll be interesting to see what you come up with. But
Yeah.
that's a good start. I'm sure Brian has some exercises. that he
Whenever I
uses.
watch TV with my wife, she's always like, and there's an ad and she doesn't buy it. She's like, if they have to say it, it probably isn't true. So you kind of like, I always feel that way about taglines. Like your tagline should be more emotional.
Yeah.
And really kind of, but if you have to say serious competitor, like in there, then not to say you're not a serious competitor, but like why do you have to say it? You know, you should be able to do something without actually show it, don't tell it. You know what I mean? So she's always like, you know, if it's like the greatest shoes since whatever, she's like, you know, if you have to say it, it's probably not true. So I don't know. I always kind of adopt that philosophy on taglines. Like,
Okay, that's
yeah,
helpful.
be more emotional than factual. You
That's
know?
helpful.
How do you deal with people getting really emotional about the logo that they've had for a really long time and they don't want to change it even though it's horrific? Because they're like, oh, well, blue was the blue of my dad's car when I was 16. And you're like, give me a break.
Yeah, that's the hardest part about our job is convincing the client that what they like isn't necessarily what they need.
Right.
So oftentimes you have to, you know, kind of talk them through it and show them, you know, that this is what you might like and what you might be attached to, but you're overly attached to it. You need to kind of have someone step back and take a look at it from the outside in.
I've done that before with 99 Designs. I know for designers out there that's like such a bad word because it's the whole crowdsourcing type of spec work thing. But sometimes just to clean the palette of some of these people, and a lot of times like this guy made the logo himself when he started the company, you know, and now the company's grown up and the logo is still there, and you're like, you know, you can go to 99 Designs, pay like $400 or $500 and have 100 people sling you designs of your thing, put them all up on one page and just be like, look at this. And a lot of times it just takes them seeing their word and some other ideas, and they're not great designs. Like, well, I've never used one from 99 Designs, and I'm sure you pay the guy, but then it's a cleaning the palette exercise, and a lot of times you can say everything you want, and they're never going to believe you, but you show them a couple of ideas, you know, make a slideshow with one on each slide, just go through 15 of them of the best. And a lot of times at the end they're like, whoa, there is potential there. So a lot of times, I mean, that's actually what I've done in the past, and it's cost a little bit of money, and you're abusing designers, but we're always we're used to it.
What are your thoughts on small business, but you want to increase market share, you've got some distributors and they're borrowing your design, and you don't have any real formula or boundaries, and you almost don't know if you want to put any boundaries on because you want them to help market your brand. Any ideas on that?
Well, I mean, it's tough. I mean, the marketplace is changing so quickly, it's almost impossible to, you know, maintain that structure. But that's why I talk about flexibility. I mean, it's okay to you know, have that flexibility with your brand and with your logo and allow people, obviously you don't want people taking your logo and spinning it upside down, but it's okay to you know, let people, you know, use it. Right.
Okay.
It just has to be, you know, maintained somewhat. You can't just turn people loose.
Yeah, we were doing some work with Mozilla, the Firefox people, you know, and they were at the time really, really tight on that logo. That Fox needed to have those gradients, you know, and it couldn't be, and everybody was changing it all over the world. There were, you know, people that were making, you know, around the World Cup, I think they had a fox with a soccer ball on it for a nose, and, you know, just weird stuff going on. And we weren't doing brand work with them, we were doing, you know, some PR work with them, but it kept coming up, we were doing social stuff, I mean, it kept coming up over and over again because that's where they were recognizing on social channels. And I think what kind of broke them finally at the end was, you know how like now in design everything's flat, like the gradients aren't cool anymore, it's all flat design. Someone did a flat fox, I think was what the file was called. And they were like, hey, there's this flat fox out there. And it was exactly their logo, just flat color on it. And they were like, wow, that's kind of okay. And then that opened the door, and then now if you look around, you know, they've kind of embraced it a little more. If you go to their website and stuff, you can kind of, I think they even have like a logo showcase or something where you can, you know. So they kind of embraced that whole flexibility thing. So, you know, I think the rules are looser.
Yeah,
You know.
So they get a new logo for free, basically?
No, I mean, it's the same thing. I think they just, you know, any big logo has that issue.
Yeah.
People are always messing with Apple logos and like sharing and stuff. So after a while, you can't police, right?
yeah.
It's just a matter of what to embrace. You can't embrace the bad ones.
Anything else?
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
I'm going to put some business cards by the donuts in case anybody wants to have.
And the slides and the presentation, everything will be up online by the weekend or by hopefully Monday. So we'll get everything up for you if you wanted to share it or watch it again. Or next month, I'll mention our next Fridays will be Innovation Spotlight on Boomtown, Inc. 500 company from last year and for 2013. And we're going to highlight them. Greer Allen will be here talking about his journey and his path up to the Inc. 500. And we'll also end that presentation with Sam Milleray from next door at the Flagship 2 facility. Started Coffee Vita a couple years back and just had a website launch. So kind of give you those two perspectives of the Inc. 500 and then hopefully soon to be. So we'll enjoy hearing about their journeys next month, and that will be, I believe it's the 21st of March. If you want to RSVP, we are filling up quickly now, so please do it early. We had, I think, 15 people on the wait list this time for this event. And I just keep seeing that happening more and more, so please RSVP early if you're interested. And you guys are the first to know. So let me know if you want to come. All right, thanks, guys.